who kept hiding bodies in this forest. The Bear Brook Murders by Desi Studios. I got no idea. I never heard of this. We'll look at it, and I'm hiding mine in the basement, to be fair. Let's go. By the way, we're putting this on at least 1.15.
In the quiet woods of New Hampshire, there's a place locals avoid once the sun goes down. A stretch of forest that just feels wrong. For years, whispers have floated through the town about what was found there, about who might have done it, about how something so
White, light brown hair, light brown curly, 5'4" to 5'7".
horrific could stay hidden in plain sight. It's a story that begins not with a person, but with a mystery buried deep in the trees. And what lies within it would change American criminal investigation forever. This is the story of that lonely forest, that secret buried within it, and the one man behind it all. This is the story of the Bear Brook murders.
Interesting. Have they ever covered something that is, I wonder, like something that's like completely, at least like an American deleter, and no, I wonder, does this still have like people from India in there or not? I'm surprised. And we're definitely gonna, because this does, oddly enough, this does occasionally get nuked.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ishwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today is one that pioneered how forensics play a role in solving cold cases.
Ishwarya, finally a long-standing wish of yours
Yes.
to cover cases that are not just Desi, but that are crazy in and of itself. There doesn't need to be a Desi element attached.
Right.
And there's an idea you came up with, which is now that we have a growing audience as well as a growing team at Desi Studios, why not, give our listeners some extra stories that they might not have heard otherwise, but that aren't necessarily Indian. And so on Thursdays now, every other Thursday, we'll be releasing cases
An
from
extra
around the
international
world,
case,
an
yeah.
international case. And this is the
They discovered a new way to capture a new audience. It is enlightened. The enlightenment came into their minds, and they were like, we should actually cover other murders as well, other crimes from other places. Yo, I need a German one. When Germany, pull up.
first one in that saga.
And we had put this up on a poll online because obviously we understand there's an identity related to the podcast and something we've built for the last 5 years. So we put this up on our story asking you guys if you'd be okay with an international case every Thursday, just as an extra thing.
That was a
and
resounding-
overwhelmingly, it was a yes. I think it was 98% from a 200-some K follower base on Instagram. So very
Subtle flex there.
excited.
But yeah, I mean, these are going to be extra cases anyway, so it's not taking away from your Saturday Desi mix. And let's see how it does. Let's see how crazy in cases that are not Desi get. And with that,
Let's
kick
dive
things
into
off.
it. It was a cold November day in
Well, it could also be the decision, because eventually you'd run out of cases, right? Eventually you would run out of cases that just happen in India. Eventually you'd run out. So this just makes sense. It just makes sense.
1985, when a group of kids wandered through the pine woods of Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown, New Hampshire, in the United States. 11-year-old Jesse Morgan and his friends were playing hide and seek near a clearing in the state park when they stumbled upon a strange object. A dark blue 55-gallon steel drum, rusted and out of place among the trees. Curious, one boy looked through the lid. The moment it cracked open, a smell so strong came out, so horrible, that the children jumped back in horror.
The smell was so bad, it just burned off your eyebrows. And every other hair that was on your head as well. Bro, not gonna lie, I can't remember any German one. They don't do shit. Austria, though, I remember one. I think they just found recently a serial deleter just randomly dead. They were looking for eternity, just couldn't find. That was a case where they had one.
Scared, they knocked the barrel away from themselves and fled away on their bicycles, never daring to look inside. The kids never told anyone. To them, they had no idea what was inside. It was just a smelly barrel in the middle of a forest. They couldn't have imagined what lay within it, though. The remains of two human beings, nor that they had just uncovered the first clues of a chilling decades-long mystery. 4 months would pass to that day before an adult would stumble upon the same scene. In November 1985, a hunter in those same woods noticed the tipped barrel and looked inside, and within minutes called the police. Allenstown police officer Ron Montplaisir arrived to find the hunter, quote, very, very white, very pale. There's a barrel up there in the woods, and I think there's some bones in there, the hunter told the inspector. Montplaisir would later recall what he found inside. The barrel contained the partial skeletons of a woman and a young girl, wrapped in plastic. Both victims had been
So, could be mother and daughter, two sisters. Interesting. Run of crimes. Nah, India's too big, too diverse, and way too populated. Well, they are not just covering, right? Just like ordinary, like one-time things, or like they do cover the occasional crazy shit. They do. So eventually, you'd run out of crazy shit.
bludgeoned to death, as the autopsies later showed, blunt force trauma to their heads. The brutality of the crime was matched only by the callousness of the disposal. As one detective later remarked, it was very surreal that a woman and a child were actually inside the barrel itself, disposed of like common trash. Investigators had no names for the woman and the child pulled from the barrel. The pair's remains were badly decomposed. The woman appeared to be in her 20s or early 30s, and the girl perhaps around 8 to 10 years old. No missing persons report in the area matched their descriptions, and despite nationwide bulletins, no one came forward to claim them. The tiny community of Allenstown laid the unidentified victims to rest in a local cemetery, a donated tombstone marking their grave. Quote, here lies the mortal remains known only to God of a woman aged 23 to 33 and a girl aged 8 to 10. Their slain bodies were found on November 10th, 1985 in Bear.
Okay, 23 and the child aged 8 to 10. Interesting. True, they never run out of crimes, but every one of them isn't as publicized, right? They won't find info. I really saw cases of behaved bodies, so yeah, Amir, you're right. Another cookie for you with cookies for him. I feel like still eventually you just run out of like actually crazy shit. Eventually. Because like eventually you would have caught up. Looking at how frequently they post, eventually you would have caught up to all the older crimes, and then you would need to cover new stuff. And that new stuff might not be as covered as well. Or not documented as well. Or still ongoing, too recent. Whatever it is. So I still think that it is content-wise a good decision, because eventually you would run into problems.
Brook State Park. May their souls find peace in God's loving care. End quote. It was a heartfelt message for an utterly baffling cold case. A woman and a child, seemingly unrelated to anyone local, murdered and discarded in the woods. Little did anyone know that this eerie discovery was only the beginning of the mystery, because the Bear Brook State Park barrel would not be the last find in those woods. Years earlier, on the other side of the country, a young mother named Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch was trying to find her place in the world. Marlise was born in 1954 in Connecticut, the second oldest of 5 siblings. Her parents separated when she was a teen, and Marlise moved with her mother to Southern California while her older sister stayed behind with their father. By her late teens, Marlise was striking out on her own. She married her high school sweetheart in 1971 at just 17 years old and soon had her first daughter.
Girlie almost had the good ending. Do you have proof? Even one story of theirs is surely true. It could be all crazy stuff straight out of someone's armpit. Well, they cover true crime, so it is, right? You can't call yourself true crime if you don't cover true crime. That'd be a bit weird. That'd be a bit odd. So I'm assuming that these are true, or at least that there's documents and everything, right? Otherwise, there would be no point.
Daughter Marie later that same year. Though the marriage didn't last more than a few years, Marlise embraced motherhood. Quote, Marlise was excited to be a mom. She loved her kid dearly, her sister Michelle would remember fondly. Friends and family described Marlise as bubbly and quirky, a young woman with a big heart and a good sense of humor. By 1974, Marlise had remarried, and in 1977, she welcomed a second daughter, Sarah. Unfortunately, Marlise's domestic life was turbulent though. Her second marriage was falling apart by 1978, and custody of baby Sarah went briefly to the child's father during.
Never mind! She did not get the good ending, almost. Too much divorce.
the separation. Marlies, however, was determined to keep her children close. By the fall of 1978, she had regained care of 6-year-old Marie and infant Sarah and was once again on her own, a single mother of two, just 24 years old and trying to make ends meet. That Thanksgiving, Marlies brought her little girls to spend the holiday with her mother's family in La Puente, California. It was a gathering meant for gratitude, but it turned into a goodbye that no one realized was happening. Marlies arrived that Thanksgiving with a new boyfriend in arm, a quiet, somewhat older man named Terry. This was the first time Marlies' family met Terry, and
It's always an older homie. It's always an older man. Girlie, stop going for the hack maxer, for the non-hack maxers. Become do it reverse. Get a young guy instead of an older one. That seems to have better results.
thing about him put them on edge. Quote, my mom might have said something to her like, he's too old for you, why are you with him? Marlies' sister Paula said, recalling that night. Terry was nearly 20 years Marlies' senior, and the family noticed he seemed to be in control. During the visit, for some reason, tensions flared. Marlies and her mother got into an argument, perhaps over Terry, we're not entirely sure. And in the heat of that conflict, Marlies made a decision. She gathered up Marie and baby Sarah, left the house with Terry, and drove off into the night. As the taillights disappeared down the road, it would be
And that was likely the last drive, Terry. That's the guy. I'm assuming that's the guy. And I'm assuming this will be the last drive they will ever have. It'll end here.
the last time Marlies' family ever saw her
There we have it.
or the girls alive. After Thanksgiving 1978, Marlies Honeychurch vanished. She stopped calling, Christmases came and went with no word. Her worried sisters and brother tried to track her down, but every lead was a dead end. Quote, through the years, my mother always said, something's not right. Where is she? Marlies' sister said.
Wait, are you telling me these were gone for years, in fact? With no trace? They might have been in that barrel. Is it a barrel? Whatever you want to call it. For possibly years?
Marlies' brother, David, remembered their desperate search. Every time we searched, we came to a dead end. We never stopped looking, he said. The family even hired a private investigator around 1985 to try to find Marlies and the girls, but that effort was also unsuccessful. Almost as if Marlies, 7-year-old Marie, and 1-year-old baby Sarah had been swallowed by the earth. For decades, her siblings held out hope that Marlies had simply started a new life somewhere and would one day make contact. They could
Well, that would have been the very good ending. However, that would not happen. Yeah, this is rough. So, they've been actually gone for literal years.
never have imagined the fate that had actually befallen her and the children. In truth, Marlies had not run off to a fresh start. She and her daughters had run directly into the arms of one of America's most notorious killers. The man Marlies left with that night was known to her family simply as Terry. They didn't know he was a dangerous drifter with a trail of broken lives behind him. His full name was Terry Peder Rasmussen, and by the time he met Marlies, he had already lived many lives under many names. Born in Colorado in 1943, Terry
So he is, okay. The baby is huge, the mega mind. Crazy. So this dude has been doing this for much longer. Also, motherfucker, is that called Dinosaur? That's just called Dinosaur. And more Dinosaur. Dinosaur. Interesting.
grew up in Arizona and dropped out of high school during his sophomore year. He enlisted in the US Navy in 1961 and trained as an electrician, a trade that gave him skills to find work wherever he wanted. After his military discharge in 1967, Terry's life took a dark turn. He married in 1968, had 4 children in quick succession between 1969 and 1972, and constantly began moving his young family frequently between Arizona and California. By all outward appearances, he was an ordinary husband and father, but behind closed doors, Terry was abusive and volatile. His wife would later recall him physically abusing the kids, once even burning their toddler son's skin with cigarette butts.
The toddler! Bro, diabolical. Okay, so we got an abusive serial delete. We got an abusive bro, saw the dinosaur, but not the rifle. Dinosaur is more cool. Regardless. So, this guy's abusive. Name changes often. I wonder, and like he literally like puts out cigarettes on his children. That's crazy.
In 1975, Terry was arrested in Phoenix for aggravated assault, after which his wife finally fled, taking the children with her. She left him
I can tell he has that hair like hairline. Ba 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 ba.
were good that year, and by 1978, the divorce was finalized. Terry's family saw him one last time around Christmas 1978 when he turned up unexpectedly with a mysterious new girlfriend in tow. They didn't know it then, but this would be their final glimpse of the man they once called husband and father. Freed from all family ties after this point, Terry Rasmussen began to reinvent himself. Over the next few years, he drifted through at least half a dozen states: Arizona, Texas, California, Oregon, Hawaii, you name it. He would take on whatever work he could find, often leveraging his Navy-honed electrician skills in oil fields and odd jobs. With each new town came a new alias. He cycled through names like Gordon Jensen, Curtis Kimball, Larry Vanner, shredding one identity and adopting another whenever it suited him. This talent for deceit earned him a fitting nickname decades later, the Chameleon. And America's Chameleon was
Interesting. Well, since he was doing that, it was a good way to basically hide away that he was deleting people.
exceptionally good at blending in. He seemed to change relationships often, finding single women with young children, ingratiating himself into their lives. He would show up, play the role of devoted boyfriend.
Why do I have a feeling this man has a family trauma with mommy? Is that the mommy issues slipping through?
And a friendly handyman, and then when it suited him, he and the women, and sometimes her kids, would simply vanish. In the late 1970s, Terry settled in New Hampshire under one of those assumed identities. Calling himself Bob Evans, he took a job as the head electrician at a mill in Manchester. Locals noticed Bob Evans always seemed to have some woman and children around, as if he was traveling with a ready-made family. In reality, those companions would come and go. By 1978, Bob Evans' new companion was a young mother from California, Marlies Honeychurch, and he had begun living with her and her two little girls. Marlies and her daughters had journeyed east with Terry from her home in California and were living as a family under his alias. What happened next can only be reconstructed from the fragments of evidence. Sometime between late 1978 and 1980, Marlies, Marie, and Sarah vanished, seemingly off of the face of the earth, contacting.
Interesting. Where did the little baby go, though? So the mom and the daughter, the older daughter, were already in that barrel. Where's the little one? Oh boy.
Nobody and never to show up again. And sure enough, shortly after, by the early 1980s, Terry Bob Evans Rasmussen had already moved on, assuming a new identity in a new state, as the bodies of a woman and a girl lay hidden and undiscovered in the Bear Brook State Park. The stage was set for a sprawling cross-country crime saga, but for years, nobody realized these events were connected. At the time, the murders in Allenstown were undetected. It wasn't until that barrel was found in 1985, just a few years after Marlies and her daughters disappeared, that the mystery of the Allenstown victims began. But even for 15 years after the 1985 discovery, the Allenstown mystery of the woman and the girl in the barrel remained unsolved and unmoving. They had been discovered, but nobody knew who they were. Then in May 2000, a coincidence brought investigators back to Bear Brook State Park and to a mind-blowing new find. A New Hampshire state trooper revisiting the old crime scene decided to survey the surrounding area once more.
I noticed just a terrain difference here off to the left, and it kind of drew my attention, so I started to walk out towards that area.
Not far from where the first barrel had been found, the trooper noticed another 55-gallon drum.
Another barrel? More victims? Or is the toddler in there, the baby? Huh.
Lying in the underbrush.
Ishwarya, it's so weird. The blue drum murders, as they've come to be known in common parlance in India today, were a figment of American killings back in the 70s. We have the blue drum Shraddha Walkar case and many other
Right.
cases where the woman is disposed or the
In a blue
victim
drum.
is disposed of in a blue drum. This has, and I didn't realize, been going on in America for years
For
before.
decades, yeah.
And another thing I noticed is this is such a 1970s and 1980s case by virtue of the fact that a man with a normal life and normal jobs cannot possibly live under multiple aliases anymore. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Sure, you can live under multiple aliases if
Yeah, that is impossible, especially since, like, you get controlled everywhere, like, for flights and shit. There's no way you can pull that. I mean, you can possibly if you have the right contacts and the right relationships. You might be able to pull this off. But nowadays, not possible.
you're in the underworld, if you're a petty criminal and you're
For like the average person, that's not possible.
evading the forces. But if you are to be a normal, come off as a Samaritan,
Right.
a member of society,
Have a job, get
Have
a
a job,
payroll. Yeah.
with all the government infrastructure from Aadhaar to national IDs, that being one thing, and then internet being one thing, and then all the points of entry and ports of entry where your identity is checked. This was so much more easy in the 70s. I'm just thinking
100%.
how easy it was. Like, how difficult would it be to catch somebody in a country that is one of the biggest in the world in terms of landmass?
Yeah.
And California and Arizona are states that, you hear California, you hear Arizona, you hear Colorado, and you go, it's states in the US.
But they're the
not-
size of countries.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. Combine your European countries. That's how big these states are, and these are
Yeah.
deserts. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's baffling to me. I mean, Marley's family, for example, had a private investigator to look into where the daughter went. And I can't imagine a private investigator in today's world saying nothing has been found.
exactly.
It's so odd. Yeah, for sure. Such a
Yeah.
figment of an old time.
Yeah.
But now in the year 2000, a second barrel has just been discovered. Turns out this second metal barrel had been there all along, overlooked in the initial search back
A second barrel has hit the forest. If you're rich enough. Yeah, if you have enough power, that is possible. But bro, if you do not, that is nowadays not big. You cannot pull that off nowadays anymore. But back then, you could just vanquish. I mean, back then, you could literally just vanquish the forest, live out the forest, and nobody would find you. Possibly.
in 1985 because it was just outside the immediate crime scene perimeter. When officers pried it open, they uncovered two more sets of remains. Inside were the skeletal remains of two young girls wrapped in plastic just like the first two victims.
Two little girls, one estimated to be between the ages of 1 and 3, the other between the ages of 2 and 4.
So another two girls. But who's the other one? Where did he get the other one?
The discovery sent shockwaves through law enforcement. Now there were 4 victims in total, all found in barrels within a few hundred yards of each other in the same lonely patch of woods. Investigators quickly concluded that these were not new murders, but part of the same crime from years earlier. The second barrel had simply been missed the first time around, hiding its horrifying contents for a decade and a half more. Based on decomposition, all 4 victims, the adult woman and 3 children, were believed to have been killed at roughly the same time, sometime between 1977 and 1981. In other words, the Allenstown 4, as they now were being called, were all murdered together.
Are you telling me Terry had kids? Well, he had kids from a previous relationship to begin with, but this could be another kid of his. This could be another kid of his. And he got rid of his own this time around.
And dumped in 2 barrels by the same unknown killer. The 2 little girls in the newly found barrel were estimated to be extremely young. One was about 2 to 4 years old, and the other was just 1 to 3 years old. Like the first 2 victims, these children's remains showed signs of blunt force trauma too, indicating they too died from violent blows. The fragile bones of these toddlers, hidden for so long, told a heartbreaking story of horror. The case that had already haunted investigators now doubled in scope. 4 females savagely killed and left in oil drums in the New Hampshire woods. Yet their identities were still a complete mystery. None of the 4 matched any missing persons report. No family had come forward in all these years to ask after a missing mother and kids. This deepened the emotional toll of the case for the community. As one local official lamented, quote, "We have 4 victims and no names. It's like they never existed."
If this could happen to these people, could it happen to somebody else around here?
There's something so wicked going on right now in this small town.
The second barrel's discovery provided crucial evidence linking the murders, but it yielded no obvious clues about the murderer. No fingerprints, no useful fibers, nothing inside the drum except the victims themselves. Whoever had killed this family had left behind only the bodies and the barrels and then melted away into the New England countryside. News of the second barrel made headlines, and New Hampshire authorities redoubled their efforts to identify the victims. The state's cold case unit now had a quadruple homicide on its hands, and at least a few precious new clues. Forensic experts would be able to compare the DNA of all 4 victims and perhaps tease out their relationship. At minimum, investigators hope to learn whether the adult woman was the mother of some or all of the children, a key to identifying who they might be. But answers would not come easy.
Okay, here we go. Let's see, are they all related? And if they are, then that means that he had another kid. If they are all related.
easy. The Bear Brook murders had only grown more perplexing with the passage of time, and it would take new science and dogged sleuthing in the years ahead to finally crack open the secret of those barrels. And so, from that year, 2000 onwards, the Bear Brook murders became an epic cold case investigation that shook the community so much that investigators were determined to solve it at all costs. Detectives pored over missing persons files from across the country, desperately trying to match one of the 4 unknown victims to a name. At least 10 potential identities were examined and ruled out over the years. Hundreds of tips poured in, but none led anywhere concrete. Then slowly, forensic science began to offer slivers of insight. In 2014, nearly 30 years after the first barrel was
Bro, that's far gone? It's that far gone. That's crazy work. Wow, so this took almost 50 years.
found, the New Hampshire State Police announced a breakthrough in DNA testing. They suddenly had at their disposal something called mitochondrial DNA profiling.
Aishwarya, it just hit me that 3 decades have gone by
Talk about a cold case.
since the drum was discovered.
Right.
And we've gone from the era of when I was saying, like, 70s, 80s, easy to disappear in America, no internet, no
To
nothing.
mitochondrial DNA testing.
To 2014.
Yeah.
I mean, we
I
were
was 14,
teenagers.
yeah.
We were teenagers, and there is the internet, and there is social media, and it just makes you realize how long this case has spanned.
Right, and we're now in the year 2014 and they have this crazy new technology which is mitochondrial DNA testing. I'm about to geek out and explain it simply to all of you and kind of help pacify the science nerd in the science dropout Aryan here as well. But essentially what we think of when we think of DNA testing sort of colloquially is nuclear DNA testing,
Yeah.
which is the DNA material found inside the nucleus of every cell. Every cell has one single nucleus, and that's where your chromosomes are contained, which is the formative sort of
Yeah.
DNA matter. Now, for cases where bodies have remained
Watches true crime turns into biology lesson. What's the powerhouse of the cell? Mitochondria. Silence. I was tortured with this one. I cannot hear it. No, leave me alone.
undiscovered out in the elements for decades on end, because there is only a single nucleus per cell, the chance of losing that DNA material is so high because there is only one shot per cell to be able to get access to that. And so in bodies that have been decomposed for so long, chances of retrieving DNA material from that is difficult. But now by 2014, there's this new technology which can find DNA in the mitochondria of the cell. The mitochondria of the cell takes some tiny amounts of the DNA material and stores it within it.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that each cell contains one nucleus, but sometimes thousands of mitochondria.
Can I tell you something interesting about the powerhouse of the human powerhouse?
Right, that's right. The
I know
joke
that
on
biology dropout here. One of the fields of biology that I wanted to pursue, I told you, was astrobiology, and I was trying to figure out how DNA synthesis happened initially, right? How did self-replicating molecules come to be? And I thought it came from space and whatnot, but that's an aside. It is hypothesized that the mitochondria was a cell of its own,
Oh, interesting.
thereby having the DNA.
Oh, interesting.
The mitochondria having DNA
Right.
is one of the many reasons why it was said that the mitochondria was a cell of its own that with another sort of became an organelle, became another part of the cell as a more symbiotic relationship, because the mitochondria gets a lot from the bigger cell.
Sure.
And so mitochondria has its own genetic
Too bad we will never know because we cannot go that far back. We have one. We have one little thing out there that seems to be connected to everything else. However, it was not the original from where life began, so we'll never know because we can't go that far back. But our common ancestor is still alive, at least one of them. Shut the fuck up, old man. He looks really like aged in this one for sure.
identity
That's
in terms
right.
of the DNA it possesses. For the genetic identity is the same as the organism it is found within.
I
in a
didn't know
human
that.
being.
That's very
But yeah,
fascinating.
so it has it's the unique organelle that has its own DNA.
And by 2014, we have the technology to tap into that and get DNA material from that to identify cold case victims as well. Using mitochondrial DNA profiling, they confirmed that the adult woman and 2 of the girls were maternally related. In fact, by 2015, it was established that the woman was the mother of the oldest girl and the youngest girl. This meant 3 of the victims were definitively a mother and her daughters. The remaining child, the middle child, the girl 2 to 4 years of age, showed no genetic relation to the woman or to the other children. This was a critical clue. Whoever the middle toddler was, she had a different mother. Investigators now knew they were likely dealing with a blended family.
So we had a random kiddo just in there. So it was a blended family. Okay, they were not. Could this be one of his kids from like previous relationships?
Perhaps a single mother with 2 kids who had somehow also taken in another child from elsewhere. Other forensic tests, now available thanks to technological advancement, try to trace the victim's life. For this, the forensic department used something called isotope analysis.
Guys, I get a call last night.
Well, it could also have been an adopted child, of course. Or maybe bro just stole a kid from somewhere. It could be, I don't know.
2 in the morning. Aishwarya oddly energized for 2 in the morning after a Diwali weekend of debauchery. And she wants to tell me what isotope analysis is. In fact, at the Diwali parties we were at, Aishwarya was telling people about the isotope analysis.
I
and I
really
said,
found it.
Aishwarya, let me just save it. Let's just save it for the case. I will listen to it and I'll react. But this woman didn't give me any rest, and she went on to explain what it is. And
So
the funny
fascinating.
thing is, it is really fascinating. So please enlighten us, Aishwarya.
All right, let's geek out on this for a second as well.
Nerds! Nerds! Stop nerding out on me! Same protons. Woo!
Explain it the best I possibly can. Essentially, in the environment, each element comes in varying different forms called isotopes.
Yeah.
There can be an oxygen 8 atom and an oxygen 6 atom, just giving a random example. And so what I've learned is that these elements of different kinds, so an oxygen 8 and an oxygen 6, may occur in different environmental conditions. So Delhi, for example, as a city might have an oxygen 6 and Mumbai as a city might have oxygen 8. And this depends on the fact that Mumbai has a water body close to it, Delhi does not. It may have to do with
Interesting.
altitude of the city as well. It may have to do with moisture content. It may have to do with soil quality.
And it is in the ratio of oxygen 6 to 8, taking the example of oxygen here. It's not that Delhi will have only oxygen 6.
Right, correct.
It's the sort of the
preponderance of one,
one
over
the
another.
other. Yeah,
Correct,
that
correct.
composition is unique to
Unique
different
to,
places.
correct. And this also shows up not just in the air, in the oxygen we breathe, but also in the soil through which we eat our food. And it's in the air we breathe, it's in the water we drink, it's in the food we're eating. And so the tissues in our body end up registering these different isotopes.
They're one nerd. Bro, this turned from to biology and physics and actually just mostly biology and chemistry here. Stop. Let's go back to the case.
Isotopes in our body. Now, what each city's own isotope structure is called an isoscape, but that's a separate matter altogether. There's these really cool maps which show you what isotope is found where.
Yeah.
But anyway, your body's tissue remembers a unique isotope based on where you grew up, what
Got
you
it.
drank, what food you ate. So that can be tested to figure out where basic vicinity you grew up and you lived. But the really interesting bit about this is it depends what part of someone's body you're testing to figure out what time period in their life they lived there. For example, if you test the isotopes in someone's teeth, that will tell you where they lived as a young child because the
Oh
tissue in the
my
teeth sort of
God.
stopped developing fundamentally at around those childhood years.
Yeah.
If you want to find out where someone was living right before they died, in the months before they've died,
So you have to check people's teeth to know where they lived. Peek. Focus, skip forward. No, I will not. This is peak educational content. It might be relevant to the case.
you'll test the isotopes in the top part of their hair, which was probably some of the last growth activity, the fastest growth activity sort of happening in the tissue of their body. And so now they have isotope analysis to figure out, because all the locals in Allenstown have said, we don't know who these 4 women are.
Yeah.
And the cops are like, we don't even know where to search for missing
Yeah.
persons reports. With isotope analysis, they can sort of figure out what part of the country did these 4 victims belong to.
That's also with a really, really old corpse.
Right.
The bones are still intact.
Bones are still intact.
And teeth
Yeah.
are bones.
They're
So
even intact.
even if the scalp might yield,
Teeth are bones. Fork found in kitchen. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. We know this.
the isoscape.
No, that's the map. But
Yeah, no, might yield an isoscape relation to
To a-
Allenstown.
right.
The teeth will show something different.
something else.
How cool. And what did the teeth reveal?
Let's find out. Isotope analysis on the victim's hair and teeth suggested that the woman and the 2 related girls had spent the last weeks or months of their lives in New England, likely in the northeastern US, not far from New Hampshire. They likely lived together in that region before being killed. The unrelated middle child, however, showed a different chemical profile, hinting that she might have spent her early years in another part of the country. Early results suggested she might have grown up in the American Southwest or the West Coast, which is states like Arizona, Texas, California, or Oregon, which were all possibilities. Later,
So they basically, that way, they were able to pinpoint where she came from. I mean, that's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting. Sure. Okay, interesting.
The testing revised this picture, but the bottom line remained. This child's origin story was different from the other victims. Who was she? Was she perhaps the daughter of the killer, brought along from a previous life? Authorities quietly began to suspect that might be the case. The little middle girl's biological father, they strongly believe now, was the killer himself. Despite these scientific breadcrumbs, the names and faces of the victims remained frustratingly out of reach. To keep the case in the public eye, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children produced facial.
So, in pretty much then, we have the woman, her 2 children, and then whatever he had produced along the way. And he killed all of them, essentially.
Reconstructions of the victims and updated them as technology improved. In 2015, at a press conference in Concord, New Hampshire, officials unveiled new composite images showing what the woman and the girls may have looked like in life. The drawings showed a mother with gentle eyes and 3 young girls with beautiful, soft features. The images were haunting, printed in black and white because the victims' exact hair and eye colors couldn't be known. Billboards and websites displayed these sketches nationwide. Some leads came in. People thought they recognized this face or that smile, but every tip led to a dead end. All the while, the remains of the Allenstown 4 rested in silence, at least this time at a proper burial site, even after being exhumed in 2000 to obtain better genetic samples. Year after year, the case file thickened with lab reports and tip summaries, but no names. It was as if these victims had been living off the grid before their deaths. No school records, no hospital visits that flagged them as missing.
See, I wonder, they must have been somewhere. It was immediately after, so they must have lived somewhere. So I wonder if there's some place where they lived, where they could live off-grid without, like, where he could take them and keep them. So I wonder.
The whole case carried an unsettling implication. Perhaps no one except the killer could have ever reported them missing because the killer had made it so that he was likely the only person close to them. While New Hampshire authorities hunted for clues in the Bear Brook murders, another baffling mystery was unfolding across the country, one that, unknown to everyone at the time, was connected to this one too. In November 1981, just a few years after Marlies and her girls vanished, a young woman named Denise Borden disappeared from Manchester, New Hampshire, only about 25 miles from Bear Brook.
Another woman. Wait, did he just, like, steal the daughter from there? From her? What the fuck is happening?
Denise was 23 and a new mother. She, her infant daughter, and her boyfriend had enjoyed Thanksgiving dinner with Denise's family on November 26, 1981. A few days later, the family discovered that Denise, the baby, and the boyfriend had vanished without a trace. Strangely, no missing persons report was filed at the time. Denise's family assumed the couple had left town voluntarily due to financial struggles, so they did not immediately involve the police. And who was Denise's boyfriend? He went by the name of Bob Evans. Of course, Bob Evans was just another alias of Terry Rasmussen. By late 1981, Terry, as Bob, had left Allenstown and resurfaced in Manchester with Denise. What Denise didn't know was that her charming Bob had likely already murdered a woman and 3 children not long before. That winter of 1981, the same eerie...
So, a woman and 3 children, okay? Okay. Were those 3, right? Or were these another different 3? I don't think so.
Tale replayed with Denise as well. Terry took her and the baby out of New
Okay, he did the exact same thing. Okay, he did the exact same thing. So yeah, that was the previous one. Okay, that was the one they found in the barrels. Okay.
Hampshire, and Denise Borden was never seen again, and to this day, her body has never been found. Denise's infant daughter did not disappear though. Instead, Terry took the baby girl with him, whisking her away as he headed west. By 1984 and 85, Terry had re-established himself under yet another identity in California. This time, he called himself Curtis Mayo Kimball, posing as a single father to Denise's little girl, whom he was now raising as his own daughter and calling Lisa, not her name. In mid-1985, California police in Cyprus pulled over Kimball.
Bro did in fact just steal a kid
For a traffic violation and arrested him for a DUI and child endangerment. He had little Lisa in the car with him while he was driving drunk. Fingerprints taken at that arrest weren't immediately connected to his past aliases. Kimball bailed out and vanished yet again, failing to appear in court. A year later, in summer 1986, under the alias Gordon,
he pulls up. Bro is switching names more often than underwear. That's crazy.
Jensen, Terry surfaced at an RV park in Scotts Valley, California, still with little Lisa in his care. By now, Lisa was around 5 years old. It was at this RV park that Terry did something unthinkable yet again. He abandoned the child. He left Lisa with the family at the RV park under the pretense of a short babysitting arrangement and then just never returned. The couple caring for Lisa eventually realized that Gordon Jensen wasn't coming back and alerted authorities. Lisa was placed in protective custody, and when the police gently asked the 5-year-old if she had any siblings, the girl innocently replied that she, quote, did, but they died from eating grass mushrooms while camping.
They died from eating mushrooms while camping. Wow. Okay. Well, in this case, that's interesting. That it really took this long to get this dude.
It was a chilling statement that investigators much later would interpret as a possible clue. Perhaps Lisa had seen or been told something about what happened to the other children. Meanwhile, Terry had once more slipped away. In 1988, he was arrested in San Luis Obispo, California, under yet another alias, Gerald Mockerman, driving a stolen car. This time, though, his fingerprints were in the police database from the DUI case in 1985, which finally linked Mockerman to his
Finally, hopefully they're getting his ass. Makes you wonder what is even getting of offing a kid. Well, a lot of killers have a sexual thing where it turns them on. That's one possibility. There's also other reasons, but that's a possible reason that can exist.
Earlier alias of Curtis Kimball. He was jailed for the car theft and, importantly, for the outstanding charge of child abandonment. In 1989, he was convicted of abandoning little Lisa, which was connected to him because of the police report the family taking care of Lisa had filed, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The legal system, however, still had no idea of his true identity or the full scope of his crimes. They knew him as Curtis Kimball, a man who had...
So, they sent him to prison for 3 years. Not because of the murders, but because of child neglect. Because they don't know his identity.
Cruelly left a child behind. His real name and his murderous past remained hidden. After serving a partial sentence, Terry was released on parole in 1990 and quickly absconded, disappearing yet again into the ether of America. For much of the 1990s, Terry was a wanted fugitive, though authorities only knew him under his fake names. He stayed off the radar until December 1999, when he popped up in Richmond, California, using the name Larry Vanner this time. By now, Terry was in his late 50s. He had wooed a new girlfriend, Yoon Jun, a 42-year-old chemist in the Bay Area.
Bro is on demon timing right here. Okay, so bro is first of all changing names all the time. He's also like picking up. What? How does this man? What kind of riz does this man have to even get through with this? What the fuck?
The two met at a Christian singles group, and Yoon, a kind-hearted, trusting soul, fell in love with a silver-haired Larry Vanner. They even held an informal backyard wedding ceremony in 2001 with Yoon's family in attendance. Nobody in Yoon's life knew Vanner's true dark history. And then, in the summer of 2002, just months after the ceremony, Yoon Jun vanished. When worried friends asked Larry Vanner where she...
Another one. Kind of crazy how many encounters he had with the police, yet still didn't held accountable for his crimes, except for the child, like not even his own child, and another woman gone.
He spun story after story. She was away visiting family, she joined a religious retreat, and on and on. Suspicious, one of Yoon's friends eventually called the police, and in November 2002, detectives searched Yoon's home, only to make a gruesome discovery. Her bludgeoned, partially dismembered remains were found buried under a pile of cat litter in the corner of the property. Larry Vanner was now, for the first time, finally arrested for murder, the murder of Yoon Jun, and at last, the law had Terry in its grasp. Even in custody, though, Terry tried to keep his identities confusing, but determined investigators in California unraveled many of his lies. Contra Costa County homicide detective Roxanne Gruenhind dug into Vanner's background and quickly realized he was linked to the old child abandonment case of Curtis Kimball. The fingerprints matched. She now knew she had a career conman and likely serial offender on her hands. Surprisingly, around the...
Wow, that took a while. I don't think one can't go on alias like that anymore. Everywhere there was some kids that will film you to TikTok. Well, obviously, now that wasn't possible, but back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that seems to have worked. That seems to have been possible, interestingly enough. Though, to be fair, that's not surprising, considering, well, they didn't have all that technology that we have now. But yeah, now this isn't possible anymore. You get caught pretty quickly.
Same time, in 2003, Rasmussen pleaded guilty to Yunsun Jun's murder to avoid a trial and was sentenced to 15 years to life in a California prison. Detective Roxanne suspected that Rasmussen had pleaded guilty so quickly to stop her from investigating his past further. Larry had overheard her talking about finding Lisa's true identity, and he likely feared what else police would find if they kept digging. Larry perhaps thought that by admitting to one murder, he could close the door on the rest of his crimes. However, his strategy
Was his plan to avoid the death penalty by admitting to one murder and getting like the full 15 years, the life in prison?
did not fully work. After 2003, with Terry behind bars for Yunsun's murder, Detective Gruenhind and others remained curious about the little girl Lisa he had once claimed as a daughter. DNA testing was done and confirmed what they suspected. Terry was not Lisa's biological father. But then who was Lisa? And who was her mother, Denise Borden? Those questions lingered as years passed. Terry, inmate number E70466, sat in prison keeping his secrets, and in December 2010, at age 67, he died behind bars of natural causes, a combination of lung cancer, COPD, and pneumonia. He took with him any knowledge of the other victims he had claimed.
Crazy. Wait, so he died early and he didn't even get punished for the crimes. He just got punished for one. Before the camera developed to this stage, you would recognize someone, only recognize you'd seen them somewhere. Yeah. And like we have like everything right, like digital ID is now slowly becoming a thing. It's just significantly harder. There's many cameras around. You just get caught at this point.
Or so it seemed. At that point, authorities still had not connected him to the Bear Brook murders. The 4 victims in New Hampshire were still Jane Does, and Bob Evans remained just an old alias on a missing person poster for Denise Borden. The stage was now set for a breakthrough that would link these parallel storylines, the Bear Brook mystery and Terry Rasmussen's trail of crimes. And it would come yet again from pioneering DNA technology and some tenacious sleuths who refused to let the cases die. The breakthroughs began with the mysterious child known as Lisa. By 2016, Lisa was a grown woman who had lived her life under a new identity after being raised by adoptive parents. She'd been lucky to find a loving home after her abandonment. California detective Peter Headley took a keen interest in finding Lisa's true origins. With Rasmussen dead, Headley hoped that uncovering Lisa's biological family might shed light on other unsolved crimes. Traditional methods had failed to locate Lisa's mother, so Headley turned to a
Interesting. So she doesn't even remember her original name, apparently. Did she forget that? I mean, Stockholm Syndrome is a thing. Maybe that's that in.
revolutionary tool just emerging in law enforcement: genetic genealogy. Genetic genealogy is essentially the study of family history and relationships using DNA testing alongside traditional genealogical records like birth certificates, family trees, and historical documents. It combines genetics, which is the science of heredity, with genealogy, the tracing of family lineages. Headley contacted a genetic genealogist named Barbara Ray Venter, the same scientist who would soon gain fame for helping crack the Golden State Killer case. In 2016, Ray Venter took DNA from Lisa, the child that Terry had abandoned, and uploaded it to online genealogy databases, searching for relatives via shared DNA segments. It was a long shot, but the results were astounding. Ray Venter identified genetic matches linking Lisa to the Borden family of New Hampshire, and by early 2017, they had solved Lisa's identity. Her real name was Dawn Borden, and she was the daughter of Denise Borden, the young mother who had vanished from Manchester, New Hampshire in 1981 with Bob Evans. This was a eureka moment. Not only did it finally give
So they're probably going to find the bodies of her. Maybe, I don't know, the boyfriend, but definitely of her. And they're then also now slowly likely going to find out who the others were. Well, we know who the others were, but they didn't know back then.
Lisa her name back, it also confirmed that Denise Borden had likely been another victim of Terry. Denise's father, Ahmad Borden, was informed and sadly concluded, quote, "I don't think they're ever going to find her. There's always that hope, but nothing's definite," end quote. It's true, he was right. Denise's remains have to this day never been located, but investigators now count her among Terry's presumed murder victims. Armed with the knowledge that Bob Evans was a killer of multiple women and children, New Hampshire authorities began to connect the dots. They noted that Bob Evans had lived in the Manchester Allenstown area in the late 1970s and early 1980s, exactly when the Bearbrook victims were likely killed. Could it be that this man was responsible for the barrels in the woods?
Bro's balding. There are currently no video games that I want to play. Same. That's. I feel the same. And Metroid Prime 4 has turned me off because of that stupid side character. How can you turn yellow paint into a character?
Woods. In late 2016, investigators compared DNA from the unidentified Allenstown victims to DNA from the Lisa, or as her real name was, Dawn Boden's case. The result blew the case open. The little middle child from the barrel was the biological daughter of Bob Evans.
So it was his kiddo. He put his own kiddo in there. Yikes.
In one stroke, the Bearbrook murders were tied directly to Terry Rasmussen, the man who had long been suspected in Denise Boden's disappearance and known to have kidnapped Lisa, was now almost certainly the killer of the Allenstown Four. Police publicly announced in January 2017 that the suspect in the Bearbrook murder was Robert Bob Evans, albeit noting that this was an alias and the man's true identity was still unknown. They revealed that Evans was the father of one of the child victims, and they suspected he had also killed Denise Boden and perhaps other unknown victims. It was a stunning convergence of investigations. A serial predator's secret trail of carnage from New Hampshire to California had finally come into view. Now, one mystery remained. Who exactly was Bob Evans? California and New Hampshire investigators teamed up to find the killer's real name. They turned once again to genetic genealogy. Although Terry Rasmussen was dead and thus unavailable for direct DNA testing, authorities had
Bro, I keep thinking of Rasputin. I'm also like, I always need to. Yeah. I feel it. I always keep hearing that. True. Yeah, it's just like, okay. So they're slowly tracing everything back over essentially 40 years, which is crazy work.
a crucial resource. One of Rasmussen's grown children from his first marriage, a daughter named Andrea, who had been traced and agreed to help. Also in 2017, a sample of DNA from Rasmussen's biological son was used to compare against the DNA profile of Bob Evans. The genetic markers pointed to the surname Rasmussen. Finally, in August 2017, authorities confirmed through DNA and family tree research that Bob Evans was Terry Peter Rasmussen, born December 23, 1943 in Denver, Colorado. After nearly 40 years of aliases and lies, the Chameleon killer had been unmasked. Investigators went public with this real name and issued a detailed timeline of his life, hoping to jog memories and find any other crimes he may have committed. The revelation of Terry's identity marked a watershed moment in law enforcement. This was one of the first major cases solved using investigative genetic genealogy, where DNA from crime scenes and unidentified persons was used to find distant relatives and build a family tree to.
Yes, at this point, they can only give, like, justice in a way, or, like, the truth to the family members. But they cannot punish this dude.
A suspect. In Terry's case, genealogists use Y-DNA, inherited from father to son, from one of his children, combined with traditional research to pinpoint who Bob Evans really was. It was pioneering work, and Sergeant Peter Headley noted that without these techniques, Terry's crimes might have never been fully connected. Quote, "If it wasn't for genetic genealogy, we wouldn't be here. It's because of this new technology that we could find out who he was." End quote. The science behind it is fascinating. Genealogists compared dozens of markers in a DNA sample to those submitted by millions of users to public ancestry databases.
So basically, without being able to essentially trace back ancestry, this would have been a cold case forever. Without knowing the victims ever. Crazy.
Finding cousin matches and triangulating common ancestors, they can zero in on a suspect's family and identity. In Terry's case, the key was tracing his family in Colorado and Arizona, revealing the school dropout turned serial killer hiding under fake names all these years.
And he wasn't stupid. Constantly changing names, even going as far to admitting at least one murder so he could escape like crazy punishment. He still died at 67, but that guy wasn't stupid.
With Terry identified, authorities could finally present a cohesive narrative. One man, at least 5 murders, likely more, spanning coast to coast over 25 years. They dubbed him the Chameleon Killer to emphasize his shape-shifting personas and the nationwide trail of destruction. But one huge piece of the Bear Brook mystery still remained unsolved. Who were the victims? Now that the killer was known and 3 of the children were confirmed to be his girlfriend's children and one of his own child, investigators hoped that genetic genealogy could also give the victims their names back. In 2017, they did something unprecedented. They extracted trace DNA from a piece of the adult victim's hair, a hair so old and degraded it had no root, using new methods to sequence it. This would allow genealogists to try to identify the woman.
Interesting, from an old hair. Very interesting. This becomes more like a lesson out here, because that's very educational. Interesting. So from a single old hair, they were still able to trace that back.
And the 2 related girls the same way they found Terry. Little did they know, a librarian with a passion for true crime would beat the lab to the punch. In 2018, as the Bear Brook case was featured in a popular true crime podcast and national news, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Rebecca Heath, a research librarian and amateur sleuth from Connecticut, had been following the case obsessively. In her spare time, she scoured online forums and genealogy websites for any clues.
Interesting. Attention from a podcast.
About missing persons that might fit the Allenstown victims. One day, Heath remembered an old post she had seen on an Ancestry.com message board. It dated back to around 1999 or 2000, and it mentioned a woman named Marlies and her 2 young daughters, Marie and Sarah, who had gone missing decades earlier. The post had been written by someone searching for lost relatives. Heath's heart raced. The names and ages roughly matched the Bear Brook victims. Could it be that the unidentified woman and the 2 related girls...
So a random lady found that out. That's kind of cool.
were Marlies, Marie, and Sarah. The poster had also indicated that the missing woman, Marlies, left with a boyfriend named Terry in the late 1970s. The last name Rasmussen even came up in conversation when Heath reached out to the family member behind the post. That detail was the final validation Heath needed. She knew about Terry Rasmussen from news reports. Suddenly, the disparate puzzle pieces locked together. The Allenstown barrels likely contained Marlies Honeychurch and her two daughters, missing since 1978 while in the company of Terry. Heath alerted the New Hampshire investigators in late 2018 with her findings. Meanwhile, genetic genealogist Barbara Ray Venter had independently been using the hair DNA to reach a similar conclusion. By building a family tree from the adult victim's DNA, Ray Venter's research was honing in on the name Honeychurch as well. Everything converged in the spring of 2019 though. On June 6, 2019, New Hampshire authorities held an emotional press conference to announce that after nearly 40 years, they had identified 3 of the Allenstown.
It took 40 years. It took almost 40 years for them to identify the victims. That's horrifying.
4. The woman in the barrel was Marlies Elizabeth Honeychurch, born 1954. The 2 related girls were indeed her daughters, Marie Elizabeth Vaughan, born 1971, and Sarah Lynn McWaters, born 1977. Marlies was the young mother who had quarreled with her family and left California with Terry around Thanksgiving 1978, never to be seen alive again. Records from that time hint at their presence around Terry. In late 1979 and 1980, Bob Evans was arrested in New Hampshire for petty theft and writing a bad check, and on his arrest report, he listed a spouse named Elizabeth Evans.
That's kind of interesting. It's not cold, it's rotten at this point. True. Interesting. So he was visible to the police multiple times, but due to this being in the 70s and 80s and stuff, it was basically impossible to catch him.
Authorities now believe this Elizabeth Evans was likely Marlies Honeychurch using a false last name to match Bob's. Now her family finally had answers. The news sent both grief and relief through Marlies' surviving siblings. Her brother David and sisters Michelle and Paula had spent over 3 decades worrying and wondering. Now they learned that Marlies and the girls had been murdered shortly after they disappeared in 1978, likely by...
Dude, you imagine your brother or sibling or sister, and you have the entire time hope that your sister's doing well, And then just 40 years later, they freaking tell you, yeah, by the way, she dead. 40 years is beyond rotting. That is crazy work.
Rasmussen, who by then was confirmed to have been Marlise's boyfriend and the last person seen with her. The detectives explained that Terry likely killed them all before 1981, as he was known to have left New Hampshire after that. Though the revelation was horrific, at least the family could lay their loved ones to rest properly. In November 2019, a funeral was held in Allenstown for Marlise and Marie. Their remains, which had been exhumed for DNA, were reburied under a new headstone, now bearing their real names. The community replaced the old, known only to God stone. Members of the Honeychurch family flew out to attend, joined by one of Rasmussen's own adult daughters from his first marriage, who came to pay respects. At the service, Marlise...
Too bad. We still don't know where one of the victims is, because we can't find her body. So, while it found an end for most, not for all. Which is sad.
His brother David Solomon spoke through tears. Quote, "We've looked and searched for over 30 years for them with no luck. We never stopped looking."
Although this moment is bittersweet, they have their names back on this day. They can rest in peace.
He thanked the local community for caring about these strangers for so long and for never giving up on identifying them. The youngest daughter, Sarah McWaters, had family on her father's side in Connecticut, so her remains were sent there for a separate memorial and burial closer to her paternal relatives. For the Honeychurch family, the decades of not knowing had finally ended. They could now properly mourn Marlise, Marie, and Sarah, celebrating the memories of a beloved sister and two little nieces whose lives were cut short. Yet, amid the solace of those identifications, one girl still had no name. The middle child from the second barrel, Terry's biological daughter, remained.
True, the biological daughters also. Where is her? Well, they could check and maybe see where there's ancestry, but that's going to be rough.
Unidentified. She had no relatives searching for her on message boards, no yearbook photos to compare. Investigators only knew that her father was Terry Rasmussen and that her mother was an unknown woman who had likely met a tragic fate as well. The Bear Brook case could not be truly closed until this last victim got her name and until her mother's story was understood. But the hunt for that information was already well underway. Known only as Allenstown Jane Doe or the middle child, investigators were determined to give her a real name. In 2016, with over 3 decades elapsed since the first barrel was found, retired detective John Cody, who had worked the case, said he was still haunted by the one little girl without a name. Quote, "People ask me why I do these interviews. It's because there's still one victim out there, one girl who we don't know who she is. That's why I do these, to get her identified, so there's closure for the families." End quote. He and others refused to let the case fade, and soon a breakthrough would reward their persistence. In 2020, forensic experts performed advanced DNA testing on her remains. Technology had progressed to the point that even with very degraded DNA, it could be sequenced. A specialized lab called Astria Forensics managed to extract high-quality genetic data, which genetic genealogists then used to search for the little girl's...
Interesting. Okay, let's see. Is the mother still alive or not? Considering that the mother didn't search for her daughter because that would have maybe been known, it is very likely that the mother is also dead.
Maternal relatives. By early 2021, there was a promising lead. Genealogical analysis indicated that the girl's mother most likely had family roots in Pearl River County, Mississippi. In fact, they traced the child's maternal line to distant ancestors in the American South. One line of research suggested she was a descendant of a man named Thomas Deadhorse Mitchell, born in 1836, who would be a 5th or 6th great-grandfather of the child. This meant her mother's family had deep southern origins. Building on those clues, the non-profit DNA Doe project joined the effort in 2022, bringing fresh resources to the table. In 2023 and 2024, the painstaking genealogical research finally zeroed in on her name. They found a woman who seemed to fit the profile of the missing mother, Rosemary Pepper Reed. Rosemary was a young woman from Texas who had run in the same circles as Terry Rasmussen in the mid-1970s. She was last seen by her family around Christmas.
And then disappeared as well. Okay, let's see.
1975 in Texas, and notably, she was pregnant at that time, expecting a baby with Terry. After the holidays, Pepper told her family she was moving to California with Terry, but after that, nothing. Her family never met the baby, and they never saw 23-year-old Pepper again after the 75 holiday season. The pieces fit. Pepper's child by Rasmussen would have been born in 1976, the right age to be the middle child victim. Digging further, the team struck gold in public records. A birth certificate in Orange County, California.
We have a birth certificate. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Damn, yeah, this is crazy.
For a baby girl born in 1976. The listed parents on the certificate were Terry Rasmussen and Rosemary Pepper Reed. The baby's name on the certificate was Ray Rasmussen. At long last,
Well, now she has a name. Now she has a name. At least that.
September 2025, New Hampshire authorities announced that they had positively identified the middle child. Her name was Ray Rasmussen, born in 1976 in California. Little Ray was only about 2.5 years old when her father murdered her in the late 1970s. A DNA match with Pepper Reed's brother confirmed Ray's identity with absolute certainty. It took 40 years and cutting-edge science, but the last of the Allenstown Four finally had her name restored. The identification of Ray brought both closure and new questions. Investigators and the public alike were relieved that this child was no longer Jane Doe. Quote, "We never forget Ray," said Detective Sergeant Chris Elphick of the New Hampshire State Police.
So where is the mother? That's another thing. Where is the mother? Probably not found, probably dead, and they did not find her either.
We never stop looking. Naming her brings a sense of justice, but also reminds us of the unanswered questions that still remain, he said. Foremost among those questions, what happened to Ray's mother, Pepper Reed? Sadly, all signs indicate that Pepper likely met the same fate as Rasmussen's other known victims. Quote, "We do regrettably fear that his daughter's mother is probably another victim somewhere," said Carol Schweitzer of the NCMEC. Despite a public appeal for information on Pepper's whereabouts or remains, her case remains open and unsolved. Investigators have asked for the public's help to piece together Rasmussen's movements between the mid-1970s and 1980s, the period during which Pepper would have died, in hopes of finding where he might have disposed of her body. But the list of Rasmussen's suspected victims doesn't end here. Over the years, authorities have uncovered hints of other crimes committed by the Chameleon killer. In 1995,
Cremated or buried in the forest, possibly. Yeah, they're never finding the other two, right? They're not finding the other two, unfortunately. But yeah.
Scavengers in the San Joaquin County, California, found a refrigerator dumped in a canal containing the decomposed body of an unknown woman. Inside the fridge, along with the corpse, were a pillow, blankets, and a distinctive brand of
That's a bit
milk, unique to an area where Rasmussen was known to have lived at the time. The woman in the refrigerator had died from blunt force trauma to the head and had been
well, there we have her in the refrigerator.
stuffed into the appliance before it was tied shut and discarded, a murder MO eerily similar to the Bear Brook barrel case. Investigators strongly suspect this could be another of Rasmussen's unidentified victims. Some have even formally speculated she might even be Denise Bowden, but DNA has not borne that out. However, without knowing the woman's identity, it's a difficult case to conclusively link to him. This victim is now next in line to remain nameless.
Okay, so possibly another one. Possibly. Potentially connected to another one. To this.
At least for the foreseeable future, a silent testament to the possibility that Terry's true body count may never be fully known. In the end, however, the story of the Bear Brook murders stands as a testament to relentless investigation and the power of modern forensic science. What started as a grim local mystery, two barrels in the woods of New Hampshire, expanded into a cross-country saga of a serial killer living under assumed identities. The Bear Brook murders changed the way cold cases are solved, pioneering DNA technologies that have since solved many other crimes, and it ensured that 4 victims, once lost to time and circumstance, will never be forgotten. If you like
Alright, so, simply put, while we have a few names, we will likely never have all of them, because obviously the dude is dead, so he'll never tell the truth. Dead people don't talk. That is a rough one. It took ages, essentially, to find this, decades. Also crazy how easy it is to just disappear in the US in the 70s and 80s. That's very interesting. But yeah, at least some victims were identified, but we still have at least 3 that we don't know of, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe.